Bible and you run across an idea that you think would work as a sermon. Sometimes perhaps you're delving deep into some Greek word or some Hebrewism and you come up with an idea. Sometimes you're driving in the interstate in Austin, Texas, and you hear a song for the first time. And about the second verse you realize, hey, I can make a sermon out of that. And you begin to grab for a deposit slip and get it turned upside down on the steering wheel, and you're driving with your knee and trying to jot down some points. And that's how I got the idea for the sermon we're going to preach on tonight. And I hate to give him credit for it because he's not a very good man in some way, but George Jones, several years ago, wrote a song and sung it, and it was entitled Choices. And a large portion of that, the thought of that song was this. He says, during my days, and he talked about his drinking, and he talked about his poor decisions. He said, all the way through my life, there were always competing forces and different voices. He said, there were some voices out there trying to teach me the difference in right and wrong. Then he says, and if I would have only listened to what they had to say, I wouldn't be here now living and dying with the choices that I have made. Now, brethren, I do think that life, when you look back on it, is really pretty simple. I can sum up your life and mine in one sentence. If the good Lord gives us 30 seconds to think about it before we die, I can guarantee you what your life is. When you boil it all down, it is nothing more than the sum collection of the consequences of the choices that we have made. That's it. And that's not just some of it, that's all of it. From whether or not you are a child of God, from where you live, to who you marry, to the kind of job you have, whatever it is that you've chosen all your life, when you boil it all down, the sum total of your entire existence is going to be the consequences or the results of all those choices that you've made. In Joshua 24, verse 15, Joshua says, and choose ye this day whom ye shall serve. Whether you're going to serve the gods of the fathers on the other side of the floods, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And brethren, every one of us have to do that very same kind of thing. We've got to choose. Elijah said it this way, how long will you limp, or how long will you halt between two opinions? Make a choice. And there are several areas in life that we need to give intense focus and to be just really key and informed and prepared to make decisions concerning. And sometimes the most important decisions in life we don't give much thought to at all. So I want us to spend our time this evening thinking about some choices of varying degrees of consequence which will have a great effect on your life. I don't care how you eat your hamburger. You can eat it like you're supposed to, with everything on it, a little bit of mustard, a little bit of mayonnaise. Or you might be one of those weird folks that gets them dry, right? Just meat and cheese, or some other weird combination. I met a guy today who said he didn't like oysters. I thought Gary was all right. If he didn't like oysters, there's something bad wrong with him. You need to watch out. No, but when it comes to what we eat, it doesn't matter. There's no moral consequences on what you eat. But when it comes to spiritual choices, the differences range between heaven and hell. Just like Joshua, we have to choose our God. A lot of people in our day, they choose the God of mammon. Matthew 6:24, they choose the God of money. Now listen, I've already told you once, I'm telling you again, I do not at all subscribe to the idea. It's an old Catholic idea, by the way, that there's piety and poverty. I don't think God necessarily wanted His people crawling around here broke all the time. That brings a whole different kind of problems into our life, But as much as that's true, so is this. There is a great danger that goes with prosperity. When we get fat and sassy, sometimes we get lazy, don't we? Sometimes, spiritually speaking, think about this when it comes to your prayer life. I don't know your life. I'll tell you about mine. I know good and well when our girl was sick and we thought she might die, my prayer life was pretty intense. You ever been in those situations? It's pretty easy to focus, when there's serious problems taking place in your life. Now, when everything's going good, a little easier to forget, isn't it? Probably so. We've got to choose the God that we're going to serve. 1 Timothy 6 through 10. There Paul gives us an idea, and I want us to get this in our mind. Godliness with contentment is great gain. I do a lot of preaching on contentment. I do a lot of preaching on sermons like, are you happy? You ever thought about that? I'll ask you right now. I'm not going to preach a sermon on it. Just think about it. Are you happy? Right now, today, are you happy? Are you content? Are you fulfilled? If you're not, there needs to be some changing take place. And this may not even be a matter of morals, but why would you want to live a miserable life? You only live once on this earth. Do something, as far as your employment goes, that makes you somewhat content. Be with folks you're content with. Find some joy. But a lot of folks, you see, they get so focused on the money. Paul there says, godliness with contentment is great gain. We brought nothing into this world and we can take nothing out. I've done 120 some odd funerals now since I've been at Bangs. We've never once filled the casket full of money along with the body. And by the way, if you did and you buried them in the ground, where's the money? In that box in the ground. You cannot take it with you. That point of truth just tore Solomon up. Remember that? You go read the book of Ecclesiastes. It irritated the hound out of him to realize, I built these big palaces, I built all these great orchards, I have all this wealth, and when I die, one of my wives is going to remarry as somebody who didn't hit a lick at anything, gets to have it, or one of my sorry worthless sons will inherit it. I did all this for nothing. He asked the question, how does the rich man die? Just like the poor. He would make the same analogy when it came to wisdom. How does the wise man die? Just like the fool. Your goods don't go with you. You ever just work and work and work because you got to have something? I heard an illustration once that I think just captures this beautifully. This New York businessman, he flew down to Cancun, and he's walking on the beach, and he walks up on this old boy who's cooking him a fish. And this guy's got him a hammock there, and he's got a little bitty small boat, and he's about to have that fish for breakfast. He'd gone out and caught that fish, and he's about to eat it for breakfast. And that businessman says, sir, can you catch fish like that all the time? I said, oh, see, senor, I catch one every day just like that if I want to. He said, man, you can catch fish like that? Yes, I can. I said, well, what you need to do then is you need to go out there, instead of catching one fish, catch you 10 or 15 or 20. And the guy says, well, why would I do that? He says, well, because you could then sell it to tourists like me. I'd love to have a fish like that, take it back to my cabin. I would eat that. And the boy says, well, then what? He says, well, then you take your profits and you buy you a couple of more boats and you hire you 2 more men and y'all go out and y'all catch a bunch more fish and bring them in and sell a whole bunch of them. And the guy said, then what? Well, you build you a cafe and a restaurant and you start selling all kinds of fish. And then what? Well, you buy you get you some commercial boats with big nets, and they'll go out there and catch thousands of them. And the man said, then what? He said, well, then you get you a cannery, you see, and you can that meat, and you send it up north to America, and you sell it, and you make millions. And the guy said, and then what? He said, well, then you have enough money to live on the beach and relax and eat a fish every day and swing in a hammock. Now, you get that? Sometimes, brethren, we run and run and run to get what we've already got. Think about that. He says, we brought nothing into this world, we take nothing out. Those who would be rich have pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Anything wrong with money? No. I challenge you to find me a single patriarch that wasn't extremely prosperous. God certainly blessed those people. By the way, you can't support the work of the church. You can't support missionaries. You can't support sending the gospel out to the world without some money. I understand that. But I am saying this. In this country we live in, where so much does seem to boil down to something's net worth, there's more out there than money that we need to be choosing and thinking about. Then there are those who choose, they just enjoy life. And by that I mean they're so keyed up, they're so involved in their entertainment pursuits. And in their daily plans. James 4 captures this. You know, he talks about a man or men that decide, he says, go to now, then verse 13. You that say today or tomorrow, we'll go into such a city and we'll stay there for a year and we'll buy and sell and get gain. For what you ought to say is, the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. But what is your life? It's but a vapor. It appears for a moment and then vanishes away. To him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him that sin. You ever get so caught up and busy that you don't have time for God? You ever get so caught up in, just entertainment things? We had a guy back home. We got a little building project going on, fixing to finish up our brand new classrooms, brand new fellowship hall. Had one guy came to the elders back when we first started, and he actually wanted some of the materials off the old one we were tearing down. But he said, now, I can't give y'all anything toward the new building. I wish I'd have been in the room. I said, it's going to take us a year to build it. You can't give us anything? In a year's time, you can't come up with $5 a week? You can't come up with $20 a month? You can't come up with anything? Got a cell phone on your hip. Your kids all have iPods. Your wife's got an iPad. You got a flat screen TV the size of the wall, and you can't come up with nothing for God? Brethren, is that not a type of covetousness? When I will just lavish myself with everything I can think of, go out to eat, do this, do that, do the other. Come collection time, not much. There are those who get so caught up in what they're doing. Well, I don't have time to go to church. Wednesday night, I just can't get there. Why can't you get there? Just going to skip it the rest of your life? It's a matter of choice. That's like, I don't see y'all's numbers up here. I guess they're somewhere. I didn't take a peek, but I'm going to guess this is probably true. Do y'all I don't know if you look at some of the elders. Are any of y'all's brethren anti-Sunday school here? I bet they are. I see heads saying no. I bet they are. I would almost, I don't bet, okay? We're not gambling here, but I'm just saying, I affirm back home, we'll have 150 for worship and about 100 for Bible class. We got about 30% that are anti-Bible class. They ain't going to be there ever. Now, if you challenge them, you're anti-Sunday school. No, I am not. It is certainly scriptural. Then why aren't you here? Tell me you're not. You are not. You are anti-Bible school if you don't come to it. Well, that's my only day to sleep in. Don't you tell me. You roll out at 4:30, 5 o'clock, get dressed, get the kids up, get them to school, get yourself to work every day just like that, on time, all the time. Come dragging in about song number 3 on Sunday morning in the worship service. There's a problem, brethren. Choose ye this day, whom do you serve? See, we all say it, oh, how I love Jesus. Don't you lie to him if you're in that category. He knows what second best looks like. Then there are those that love their family more than God. This is a serious point right here. They're all serious, but a lot of people, man, they're strong until their family begins to mess up. Matthew 10:34, Christ there said, I think not that I came to bring peace on earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword. And a man's enemies shall be they of his own house. And whosoever loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And whosoever loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whosoever loveth daughter-in-law, and talks about daughters-in-law, mothers-in-law, I can't believe that one's in there, the mother-in-law part. But nonetheless, the point is there, you can't love anybody more than you love me. And it says that if you don't take up your cross and follow after me, you are not worthy of me. Listen, brethren, he's not playing games. Jesus Christ will either be first in our life or he won't be there at all. Now, we get that? That's what he's saying. You can't put your wife, you can't put your parents, you can't put your kids, you can't put anyone or anything. That's what an idol is. That's what a god is. And we probably all have certain things that appeal to us. But whatever it is, I must be willing to sacrifice whatever it is, if it comes to that choice, to put him first. That's the whole point about pluck out your eye, cut off your hand. He's not endorsing self-mutilation. He's saying, put me first. Choose ye this day whom you shall serve. Then there are those who just want to ignore the issue. There is so much ignorance today. And there's so many people who just don't seem to want to make a decision at all, just kind of rock along, que sera, sera, what will be, will be. Heard of these 2 old men, one of them walked up and said, you know what, John? He said, what? He said, I tell you what I think is wrong with the church. I think it's ignorance and apathy. What do you think? John said, I don't know, and I don't care. Isn't that how some folks are, They don't know, and they don't care. Well, you better care, because Hosea 4 and verse 6 says, behold, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I shall also reject thee. And sometimes we excuse ourselves, well, it's just hard. Do not lie to me. Do you know what level the Bible is written on? What grade level? Some of our preaching brethren need to listen to this too. 3rd to 4th grade level. 4th grade reading level. Jesus Christ spoke on a 4th grade level. If we can't get it down where folks can understand it, that is a flaw in the pulpiteer, not in the gospel. Jesus Christ spoke, and it has to be that way because every man, every woman, every accountable person is going to stand before God and give an account for, did you or did you not follow these words? It has to be understandable. Don't play ignorant. Matthew 7 verse 7, Christ says, if you knock, what's he say next? It shall be open. If you ask, it shall be given. If you seek, not all at once, ye shall find, right? That's exactly right. People who don't know aren't seeking the truth. I don't want to offend you or me. We ain't no smarter than everybody else. The only difference in those who are saved and those who aren't is we stop long enough in this world to seek the truth on spiritual matters, to knock on the door of salvation, to ask the questions of life. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? What's it all about? We're not a bunch of animals like a bunch of old cows. Get up in the morning and graze all day, get a drink, lay down and sleep, get up and do it again tomorrow. But there's too many folks who live that way. Choose ye this day. We've got to choose our God. If you're here tonight and you have not chosen yet, you know, I think for the most part, I get up and you preach and you just pour yourself out to people who already know. How many of y'all raise kids? Or how many of y'all were kids? That gets all of us, right? So when you were a kid and you weren't doing right, mom and daddy, they're giving it to you. And you're sitting there giving that blank, mom, did your parents ever say, don't you look at me like that? I heard that a lot, right? Don't you get that glazed over, heard this before, don't want to hear it again, look in your eyes. You ever do that to your parents? Your kids ever do that to you? You know if you're this way. We preach to people, I think the more I do this, the more I'm convinced that most people know exactly where they are, spiritually speaking. They simply won't do anything about it. Reminds me of a story of a man that had a pet store, and in that pet store he had him a parrot. And one day this guy walks into the pet store and comes to the counter, that parrot sitting right there on one of those perches, and he says, "Whew, you're ugly." And the man got offended. He calls the owner and says, "Hey, that bird said I was ugly." I go, "Okay, I'll talk to him. The guy leaves. Don't be calling my customers ugly." Next day the guy comes in. He goes, "Whoo-wee, you are uglier today than you were yesterday." Man, the guy gets highly offended. He throws a fit, says, "If it happens again, I'm going to sue you." And he leaves. And the owner takes that bird and he sticks him in the ice box for a while. That's a refrigerator for you uneducated folks. But he puts him in the ice box, kind of gets him kind of suffocated down just a little bit and cold, and takes him back out. Says, "Now listen, if he comes back tomorrow, don't you say that to him." He's on that perch. That man walks up there and he looks right in that bird's face. The bird ain't said nothing. And he says, "You got anything to say to me?" And that bird looked right back and said, "You know." Friends, if you are not a child of God, we're going to come to the how here in just a little bit. If you're not where you're supposed to be, if you've been making choices concerning God and service and putting Him first that aren't right, you know it's time we do something about it. Now let's shift gears and look at some other choices besides just choosing who our God is. Let's look at some daily choices that have a tremendous impact. The first one, we're going to have a whole sermon on this on Wednesday, but the first one is who we marry. Man, I sit back sometime and shake my head in wonderment and astonishment at some of the poor choices people make when it comes to a spouse. You're not buying a pair of shoes here, brethren. You are choosing a mate for life. When you look at that girl, you look at that boy, you better be looking at, this is going to be my husband and the father of my children and my provider. He's got those big old gauges. That's earrings for you old folks. He's got those big old gauges in his ear. He's got those staples all in his eyebrow. He got something tucked in his tongue. Tattooed all down his arm. Walk away from him. Give me a break. 7-Eleven ain't going to do it for you when 3 or 4 kids show up. That's about the only job he's ever going to get. And you have girls that look the same way. Got tattoos all over and showing it all to you as they go around. What are you doing? Yeah, that's going to be good wife material one of these days. What's that tattoo called? You know what that tattoo's called across the hips? It's called a tramp stamp, isn't it? You got one you shouldn't have. And you get those belly button rings and cut those shirts way up to here and those breeches way down to here to show it to you, don't you? What are you doing? You ask that girl out. Now, we certainly hope to impress them with the truth and get them converted one of these days, but we're talking about choosing a spouse. most couples spend more time planning their wedding than they do the marriage. Now think about that. And the divorce rate is terribly high. And we'll deal with some more of that specifically later. But when it comes to choosing a mate, I've got to choose a helpmeet. You're trying to find you a partner for life. You start talking to him, he's just so handsome. He got that blonde hair and them blue eyes, and he's so buff, he's just big old built up. Look around the room, girls. It doesn't stay that way. You get that furniture disease. Your chest, it falls down to your drawers, you kind of start sagging. And you ladies, come on now. You can put all the makeup cream you want to on there, but over time, the hair turns gray, the skin does wrinkle, different things. It just changes. But I tell you what, you get a hold of a good, godly, happily married couple, I guarantee you my wife's a whole lot more beautiful to me today at 38 years of age than she was at 17. And she knocked me out then. In other words, the beauty, you see each other, I think in our eyes, we stay the same. Thank the Lord, right? As far as how we sometimes really go. But if you fall in love with the muscles and the hair, what are you doing? He's pot-bellied and bald. He's not the guy you married, is he? Well, he is, just got some age on him now. There's got to be more to it than that. There has to be a choice made that has some serious spiritual considerations involved. Ephesians 5, verse 11. Should a Christian marry a non-Christian? The answer is an unequivocal no. Have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. Should you be able to fellowship your spouse? I want you to answer that one. Should you be able to fellowship your spouse? Yes, you marry somebody who's in a denomination. You marry somebody who holds some foreign Eastern religion. You marry somebody who's not a Christian. You don't have any spiritual fellowship with them. Why would you marry someone you can't even pray with? Live every day of your life with someone who means they are the air you breathe. And you carry in the back of your mind the knowledge of the fact that if he or she dies, they are going straight to a devil's hell. Why would you spend a lifetime with someone here you're never going to see them hereafter? And friends, I know there are exceptions. There are examples of people who did marry non-Christians and through time they converted their spouse. That does happen. But for every one of them, I bet you there's 100 go the other way. Sunday morning rolls around, mama's laying in the bed. Daddy's trying to braid hair to get his little girls dressed to go to church. That's going to be real pleasant and fun, isn't it? Usually the way I see it, it's the other way around. Where a poor, sweet, godly woman dragging the kids in the back door by her. I got one back home. I have preached to her husband for 16 plus years. He comes every Sunday morning, but he won't come any more than that. And it crushes her. And I've done everything from hellfire and brimstone to beg and plead, and he is not thus far. Listen, I hope he gets cancer. I really do. Gets real sick and knows he's going to die. And then maybe he'll open his heart and do what's right. But I'm telling you, when it comes to choosing a spouse, why would you choose someone who's not going to help you go to heaven? Who's not going to help your children go? In fact, who's going to wind up being an enemy in spiritual matters in your own house? Undercut everything you say. Some of y'all raise kids. It's tough enough getting to the teenage years when mama and daddy are totally agreed on what's right. We don't need the other one undercutting what we do, what we say. And we're going to have a whole lesson on the home as God designed it on Wednesday, so I'll get off this point. But when you see a young lady or you see a young man that you think attracts you physically, that's fine. But there's 7.1 billion of those on the earth. Odds are pretty good. There's plenty of them you're going to find cute, one way or the other. You need to find one who's both, who's spiritually minded, who is a child of God, and who's cute. By the way, you can have both. Don't you settle for less than what you deserve. 2 Corinthians 6 and verse 14, don't be unequally yoked. Another choice, another big, very important choice here. What kind of job are you going to have? It amazes me how people just grow up and they have no clue what they want to do. But when it comes to God's people, I can't have just any old kind of job. Number one, I can't have any kind of immoral job. I can't go down here and work at Budweiser. I heard about a preacher once. Poor guy moved to Kentucky. He gets there, and first Sunday morning he gets up and he begins to hammer away on the evils of alcohol And the elders waved him over that afternoon and said, listen, Hoss, you can't preach on alcohol here. We're right here in Bourbon County now. There's a lot of our brethren who make their living down there at the distillery. You can't preach on alcohol. He said, okay. Next Sunday morning, he gets up there and he preaches against the sin of parimutuel gambling. And they say, whoa, time out, come here. This is Kentucky. I mean, this is where the race horses are bred. You can't pick on our brethren about racing their horses. He said, well, okay. So next week he gets up there and he preaches on the evils of tobacco and smoking. Whoo, you can't do that. Come here, son. All these guys over here, that's the tobacco growers. You can't preach on that. He says, then pray tell, what can I preach on? Guy says, well, voodoo. We don't have any of those around here. Brethren, when it comes to our jobs, Christians have got to be extremely serious. You young ladies cannot go work down at Hooters, nor can you men, by the way. You can't go cook there. Can't go to work for Budweiser. I'll go a step further, step off the moral side. You don't need a job that is so constructed that it takes you away from your family all the time. There are many, many examples of men or women, but they're gone, they're not home. The husband's not with the wife, he's not with the kids. Several years ago, Reba McEntire sang a song from a girl's perspective about her father. And she says, the greatest man I never knew lived right down the hall. Remember that? That'll give you pause, won't it? Listen, even what I'm doing right here tonight, I'm going to miss 30 days of my kids' lives this week. You know that? I got a wife and 4 kids. That's 5 people. Gone 6 days. How many days is that? That's 30 days. Now, I'm not crying about that, but I'm saying even preachers, you got to be aware of that. Because too much, and it'll hurt your marriage. Too much, it'll hurt your husband, your child-parent relationship. If your job takes you away from your family an inordinate amount of time, and by that I mean if it hurts the family, get a different job. I'd rather eat cold dog food out of a can, brothers and sisters, than lose one of my children or lose the spark between me and my wife because I'm gone too much. Amen? And I know how men think. Men, you'll do anything. You'll work 2 shifts, 3 shifts. You'll do whatever you have to do to provide for your family. And that is commendable, but it can be foolish. They don't need the name brand shoes and the name brand clothes and a fancy car as badly as they need daddy in the house. You know how kids spell love? T-I-M-E. Wrestling around on the floor. Chunking an old football back and forth to them in the backyard. Playing goldfish. Watching some goofy, I saw so much Barney when my kids were growing up, it made me puke. Just seeing the color purple. But you do it anyway because they want to. Daddy, come color with me. They can out-color me pretty quick. But nonetheless, you got to sit down there and color with them. Now, I know the Bible says in 2 Thessalonians 3 and verse 10, if a man won't work, neither let him eat. But brothers, I'm talking to the men mainly right now. If our job destroys our family, we need a different one. If the job is so constructed that the pressures of it mess you up in the mind, make you negative, make you have a bad attitude, make you sour, and you walk in the house and you're all tied in knots, that's not good, is it? We have to make sure that our priority is God and family. Find a job that is conducive to maintaining a Christian environment in the home. Matthew 6, verse 33, seek ye first the kingdom of God. Brothers and sisters, that's in all areas. I cannot have a job that draws me away from God morally or that is so time intensive or so emotionally draining that it ruins my influence in my house. Now, I'm not planning on that one. Because I see far too many. You know what you see too much of? I'm sure this doesn't happen down here on the Gulf Coast. Back home every now and then. Have y'all been shocked by the amount of divorces among the older 45-plus generation? 45, 48, 50. You know what happens? They fall out of love because they don't know each other. During those middle years, he's gone working, she's running kids around, and whatever romance was there and whatever emotional bond was there goes out. And one evening they look across the table and they don't even know each other. Serious matter. Our kids graduate, go to school, and never come back because they never were emotionally bonded with their parents at all. Doesn't have to be that way, but we only get one chance to do this, brothers and sisters. One. Everything else you mess up, you can get a second shot at. The family while the kids are little, you only get one time. That's it. Another choice that has great consequence is where we're going to live. Do you know why I live in Bangs, Texas? Because I want to. Right out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nobody. I can watch the big old sunset go down every evening. Quiet, see the stars over my house every night. Know pretty much everybody in town. If my kids do something at school, I know it before they get home. You went to a town like that, didn't you? Something nice about a small town, you know. But there are certain places you shouldn't live. I wouldn't live in New York City if you gave it to me. I wouldn't live in San Francisco if you tied me down. Would you? You know, the Bible actually is filled with examples of cities that ruined families. Think about the children of Israel. Well, first of all, think about Lot. Remember, that whole scenario there was just from the get-go was a bad deal. Abraham asked him. Now, Abraham's the older one. Lot, which side do you want to go to? Lot should have said, Uncle, you're the oldest one, you choose. But he cast his eyes toward where? Sodom. Good pasture. There's that job, guys. Good pasture, good prosperity, good place for a shepherd to be. So he goes towards Sodom. Next time you read about it, when he gets captured, he had pitched his tent towards Sodom. Next time he comes up in Genesis 19, his house is in Sodom. And the next time we read about him, he and his daughters have left, but Sodom is in them. You get that? The trouble was not when Lot moved to Sodom. The trouble arose when Sodom moved into the heart of Lot's family. You understand that some of his kids stayed behind? You read that context, he went to his daughters and sons-in-laws. He went to the ones that were married and they laughed at him. They were sodomites. Not necessarily in the sexual practice, but in the heart they were. They wouldn't heed God's word. They wouldn't listen to God's man. How about that generation of slaves that Moses brought out of Egypt? Moses brought them out of Egypt and one day worked all those miracles and bam, there they go. Crossed the Red Sea and away they go. He got out of Egypt in one day. But in 40 years, God couldn't get Egypt out of them. Never did. That generation to a man, minus Caleb and Joshua, to a man they died, still being slaves in their heart. They never got Egypt out of their heart. Oh, let us go back to Egypt. They had lentils, they had fish, they had onions. Brothers and sisters, if you move to a town, it may be right here. But if you get somewhere and the circumstances are negative and you see the kids or you see yourselves, changing your attitude, moving away from what's right, you better make a geographical change. We're not grown down. And by the way, not the point of my sermon, some folks get all worked up about politics. They get all tied in knots. I'm just tell you one thing about that. Most of our people immigrated here, and we can immigrate somewhere else. We're not trees. We can move if we need to. All right? You're a Christian. You can be a Christian in Texas. You can be a Christian in Chile. You can be a Christian in Ireland. You can be a Christian in a communist, socialist, or whatever else kind of country. Where does our confidence lie? Lies in God, doesn't it? 100 years from now, is it going to matter to most of us who wins November 12th? By the way, not that you need to know, but I certainly do not see how a Christian can vote for pro-abortion, pro-homosexual, and anti-God across the line, okay? It certainly is a sin, by the way, to do so. Can you imagine standing before God? Did you vote for a pro-abortionist? Yes, I did. Pro-homosexual? I don't think so. My point is right back here, if things do change, if things do get right, if things do go somewhere else. Abraham never stayed in the same town more than a month or two ever. But we have to make decisions based on our moral well-being. I'll give you a time when this occurs. When kids get ready to go to college. Sometimes you talk to parents, where are they going? Oh, they're going to go to Harvard. They're going to go to Yale. Mine aren't. You know why? There are no churches up there. The first question when they begin to look for a college is this: what kind of church is in the town where they're going to go? Isn't that true? Shake your head, yes. I don't care where they go to school. I could care less. If there's not a church there, they go somewhere. Did you know that 73% Almost 3/4 of all of our Christian kids, when they leave the house and go to college by age 25, they have quit the church. 73%. They're getting an education all right, but they're getting no Bible, they're getting no support, they're getting no reinforcement, they're getting weaker and weaker and weaker every day until they're gone. You've all had that conversation. What's your son doing? Oh, he made a doctor. He went off and he made a doctor and he got him a new house and he's doing well. Oh, really? Where are they going to church? Well, they don't really go anymore. I'll look you in the eye with pride if my boy Dawson is a ditch digger and a faithful servant in God's kingdom. And brethren, we have got to instill that in our kids, I mean from the get-go. Sometimes we do a horrific job in this area. We ask them, they get home with their grades. What are your grades like? Well, I made a C. You made a C in math. You can't have a C in math. We got to get us a tutor. We got to study. We got to work on this stuff. Go to school early. Stay late. Do extra credit. Got to work on this. Get your grades up. Why? So you can go to school and get a good education. Why do I need a good education, Mom? Because you got to have a good job. Why do I have to have a good job for, Mom? Well, so you have a good living. What do I need a good living for? Well, it's just a whole lot easier. You don't have to struggle like me and Daddy do. It's a whole lot better way to go through life. You need to do that. Same kid comes home 52 Sundays a year and they're never even asked, what did you study in Bible class? Now you tell me honestly, what lesson are we teaching? I think the ugly truth, brethren, is our kids, for the most part, they learn exactly what we teach them. And they put the emphasis exactly where we did. We have to make sure that we actually are consistent and teach them and show them and lead them. I'd much rather my kids be able to know the plan of salvation, know how to worship God, know the truth about the church, and be a B or C student or flunk out. I don't care. By comparison, wouldn't you? Guarantee you would. You don't think so? You find somebody who's got issues in that regard, that part of life. We have to make choices based on what's going to help us. Where we're going to live is going to help us be faithful. And then we got to choose friends that'll help us. 1 Corinthians 15:33. Evil companions corrupt good morals. We can't be running around with a town hooligan. You're teenagers. I talked about the gauges and the piercing and the tattoos and all that nasty stuff out there. And when you see your kids running with them, you're like, whoa, listen now. You're not going to go with that one. You're not going out with him or her. But I want to give you an adult comparison. What do you watch on TV? What kind of shows do you watch on television? Is it full of bad language? Is it full of immodesty? Is it full of innuendo? Brethren, there is so much trash and filth on television nowadays. There's not much you can watch. You ever have a member of the church come along, some movie comes out, it's at the theater, and they say, oh, you got to see that show. It's really good. And you ask them, well, the commercial looked kind of rough. Oh, no, there's one or two words, but it's fine. You ever heard somebody do that to you? Come on now. Am I the only dummy in the room? I guess y'all smart. I've heard that before. Hey, baby, let's go to the movie. Go to the show. I mean, you got to get up and leave. It's just blank, blank, blank. And you're like, what in the world? You know what happened? I'll tell you exactly what happened. Those members who told us that, they don't cuss, but they have seen and heard so much vulgar language on their own television in their house for so long, they have become desensitized to it. They don't hear it. There are some trashy shows out there. What's that one now? Is it called Modern Family, the New Modern, or Modern, whatever? Bunch of homosexual couples. Glee. Any of your kids watch Glee? They shouldn't. It's a singing show about a bunch of little tinny boppers. A couple of months ago, they had an episode where we had a homosexual couple, two boyfriends, and we had a heterosexual couple, and they both lost their virginity at the same time on the same show. That's just good entertainment, isn't it? Do you think that's going to have an effect on how your children view what God calls an abomination? I'm telling you, brother, it bothers us. I know it does. We get more and more used to filth and trash. When I was in high school back in the 80s, when you first kind of heard homosexuality, kind of what that was, ugh. I mean, just a full body shiver, right? Just ugh, right? Brethren, it's so prevalent now, we don't have that response anymore. I'd say homosexual. Nobody blushed. Back then, if you even used the word of the pulpit, oh, we don't need to use that kind of language. It's everywhere, isn't it? We've gotten used to it. This passage makes it very clear. Evil companions, evil associations, evil surroundings, evil environments corrupt good morals. Where did Lot's daughters learn or conjure the concept of incest and drunkenness? In the environment they grew up in. We've got to also make decisions based on finances. There are financial decisions to make. You can make decisions when you're growing up, you younger kid, before you get to college. Today, a lot of kids go to school and just take all these student loans, just one after another after another. I know one back home. I think he's finally going to graduate after about six and a half years in school with about $125,000 worth of debt. If he's lucky, he'll make a junior high teacher. If he's lucky. So he's going to make $30,000 a year with $125,000 debt. That's a brilliant concept, wasn't it? And the reason I bring this up, it goes to married folks too. Got to have new cars, got to have a big house, got to have a big boat. And then we struggle. And some of these ideas are interlinked. You get 2 car payments and a boat payment, a big house payment, maybe a weekend place, maybe a condo somewhere, a timeshare somewhere. And you're always broke. And now, brothers, we're back to that second job now, right? I got to have another job, pay for all this stuff we got to have, so I'm not home to help my kids and be with my wife. When you're broke, your wife goes out shopping, buys a $5 pair of shoes. She comes in, that's what you need, another pair of shoes, woman. All of a sudden now we're fighting. We wouldn't have fought if we weren't broke, you see. Over that shoe or over that power drill, he has to have another one. Never does use them, but he's got to have one. You see, we put financial strain on ourselves. And then here comes a missionary some Sunday night, and he gets up here and he tells you about a wonderful work somewhere in the world. And he just needs a couple of $1,000 to get it done. Well, I'd like to help you, preacher. We can't. Can't? Or have we made decisions all the way through our lives that have put us in such a financial strain that we're no good to God at all in that area? But there's been a lot of serious thought going, more than we have time to develop right now, but going into financial decisions. You know, a lot of times when it comes to finances, you know, we kind of, well, you know, if I had more money, have you done that? Well, if I had it, I'd give it. You ever done that? I heard about these 2 old boys, they're sitting on the back porch. One of them looks at them and says, hey, Joe. Joe says, what? He said, if you had $2 million, would you give me $1 million of it? Old Joe scratches his head and said, okay, Bob, you're asking me, if I had $2 million, would I give you $1 million of it? Yes, sir, that's what I'm asking you. Yes, I would. If I had $2 million, I'd give you $1 million of it. About a minute goes by, and the first boy speaks again and says, hey, Joe. Joe says, what? He said, would you give me a pig? He said, now, Bob, that ain't fair. You know I've got 2 pigs. Now, aren't we that way sometimes when it comes to the Lord? You know? If I had more money, if I had a better voice, if I this, if I that. Brethren, listen, we don't owe God what we don't have. But we need to give God what we do have. And some of our financial decisions have a very serious and lasting effect on our marriage, on our child rearing capacity, and on our contribution capacity. We make choices based on how we're going to raise our kids. I already touched on this a little bit. Proverbs 22 and verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he'll not depart from it. Anybody here have a kid that's a pitcher? I've got a daughter, man. She is smoking fast, wicked softball pitcher. Now, she's good at it. And we spend hours every week working on the drop ball and the screwball and the rise ball and the good old fastball. I'm talking to myself, just like I did a minute ago. Same thing for you. We spend hours doing that. We have to have that same kind of training in spiritual matters. We need to be going over the Bible with them, studying with them, talking with them. I try to get my kids sometime by themselves. We go get something from town. I just make up something. Hey, go with me. Just to have that drive to town and back, to ask them questions and get them thinking about things. We've got to train them. You know how you train a young boy to be a godly man? By the way, you fathers of boys, God gave you the list of what a man's supposed to be. You know what? It's the elders' qualifications. That's what you're trying to put into your son. You may get him there, you may not, but there's your list. That's what you're trying to instill in your young man. But you make a good boy just like you make a good dog. You put him in your pocket and you take him with you. You put that puppy in the car with you, the truck with you, get him out, you show him how to mount, you show him how to dismount, you show him how to, if you're working cattle, when to go, when to stop, when to heel, when to head. You train children the same way. You got to train them. Don't let the devil restructure our life time-wise to where we don't have time to do what's important. We should be time misers when it comes to our family. More time with the kids. You ever seen the studies of how little bit of time, especially fathers, spend with their individual children? If you'll be honest about that, that would sober some of us dads. Individual, one-on-one conversation with each of your children. I know for a fact there are days that I don't do it at all. I called my kids last night, maybe a minute each on the phone. I ain't there. Now, this is the exception. I don't do this every day, but I'm telling you, it's worth thinking about, isn't it? All of us need to work on this. Then there are choices we make when it comes to what we feed our mind. Matthew 10:34, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. That goes back to that thought about the television, about the movies. What are you thinking about? You know, you can't get out of your heart what's not in there. That's why we have to feed on the Word of God. That's why we need to grow and develop. I can't show you the image of Christ in my life if I don't know what it is. And I can't figure it out without reading the book. I choose the books I read. I choose the time I spend in Bible study. I choose the time I spend delving deeper in certain topics. They'll help enrich me as a person. And finally, we choose whether or not we become a child of God. Matthew 12, verse 30, Christ there says, he that is not with me is against me. Are you a Christian? That's question number one. Have you studied the Word of God sufficiently to come to a knowledge of the truth relative to our problem, which is sin, God's solution, which is Jesus, and then the method through which that happens, which is the plan of salvation? I've got to believe in Him, John 3 and verse 16. I've got to repent of my past sins, Luke 13 verse 3. I've got to confess my faith in Him with my mouth, Romans 10 verse 10. And I've got to be born again, John 3 through 5. Born of the water and the Spirit, so that I can see the kingdom of God. I have to ask people sometimes, I don't see why you have to do that. Here's a question for you. Can you be saved outside of Jesus? What's the answer? No. Well, Galatians 3, 26 to 27 says, for as many of you as were baptized into Christ. You can't be saved out of Him, outside of Him, and you can't get into Him except the water given of baptism. First question, are you a Christian? Second question, are we who are Christians, are we making the appropriate choices? Have we put God where He needs to be in priority, not in my mouth? Everybody says it. I've rarely met a Christian who says, I don't really think Jesus is most important. We all say it, but is it true? You know, Matthew 15, 7 through 9, Christ there says, well did Isaiah prophesy of you, you hypocrites. For you worship me, or you honor me with your mouth and with your lips, but your heart is far from me. I can't read your heart, but you can. See, I know how I am when you ain't looking. And you know how you are when it's just you and God. Brothers and sisters, is He first in our lives? Have we made the right decisions, the right choice when it comes to job, when it comes to our marital preparation? You who aren't married yet, if you're in a bad marriage, we can work on marriage counseling. We can deal with that. Once you said I do, and she said I do, you did. And now we'll work on we can work some of that out. If we have issues, for those who haven't done so yet, you get your mind right and you make the right kind of choice. But when it comes to our job, when it comes to our environment, when it comes to the towns where we live, when it comes to those other matters we touched upon, what you feed your mind, brothers and sisters, I cannot police and do not wish to police your life. Wouldn't do it if I could. Can't anyway. And you can't police mine. But I wanted you to think seriously, and I hope you will, to understand the choices we're making in the here and now are going to seal our eternal destiny. We're choosing today life or death. We're choosing eternal glory or eternal punishment. As we stand and sing tonight, the choice is yours as to which way you're going to go.
Days are filled with hands are lifted at